Fabulous. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of She Owns It. And I am very excited today that we are joined by a very special guest who has carved out some time in her incredibly very busy schedule, Debbie Marriott Lavery. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Robin. Hi,
Thank you so much for joining us today.
pleasure, as always. Pleasure. It's great to see you.
Very, very excited to get stuck into everything that you are going to bring to the table. And I'm going to give a very brief overview of Debbie for those of you who do not know her. And then I will also ask you to kind of expand on that, Debbie. So obviously the theme of the day is confidence in negotiation and assertive communication. So I'm going to give you a bit of an intro into Debbie, and like I say, then I'll let you expand on yourself. So Debbie is Chief Executive at Wirral-based Magenta Living and former Group Executive Director of Affordable and Supported Housing at Places for People. In her early career, Debbie fast-tracked through the NHS as a qualified healthcare professional before holding senior roles with Care UK and Anchor Trust, and now has over 20 years experience working at a very senior level in the health, housing and social care sector. Debbie also won the 2021 Inspiring Professional of the Year Award and the 2023 Inspiring Leaders Award. So we are very lucky to be getting all your leadership tips today. And outside of the very busy schedule, Debbie is a keen amateur artist in her spare time and also has published a debut book, which is incredible, called Styling It Out, and runs a very successful podcast called Beyond the Dots. So, yeah, of all of those things, you also have the time to jet set off to start a very new chapter in your life in Australia in, as you said, just in a week's time. So thank you so much for joining us with such a decorated career. So can you tell us, I guess, outside of the facts, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Robin. Oh my God, it's always you listen to things like that. You think, who the hell are they talking about? Like, I'm possibly me. Like, really? Like, oh my God. The whole imposter syndrome and the inner saboteur is like never goes far away, does it? Which is probably a good thing in many ways. So as it says in the bio, so I originally started off as a nurse, as a qualified nurse, trained nurse. I was then fast tracked through the NHS into the NHS's management programme. So I was a sister by the time I was about 22, 23, which I look back now and is just staggering, really, when I look at my stepkids who are that kind of age and think there's not a cat and house chance they could hold down that amount of responsibility. So it's like, quite know what I was doing at that age and how scary it was for
Yeah.
me to be running those wards. So that's kind of the first bit. And then I guess because I was in those management positions quite early, my career just took different a different path and different course, really. I guess I learned very quickly the power, I guess, of influence around leadership and just what that meant that you could do to make a difference to, in my case then, patients and teams, and then kind of latterly it's become customers and teams. And then I've always been in the world. I guess it's inherently runs through me. The whole kind of nursey bit's never really gone away. So everything that I've ever done, I guess, has been around trying to make a difference for individuals and for people. So I think it looks like it's a really colourful career, and it's kind of how have you gone from healthcare to social care to housing. But actually, it does really make sense because the connections of all those things, healthcare, social care, are inextricably linked, and latterly housing is inextricably linked as well. The three things together are just, I think, really important for today's society. And I think I've just grasped opportunities that have been given to me. And
Yeah.
and that's kind of where I am, I guess, today. Hence why
Yeah.
I'm going to Australia.
Well, what does Australia bring
So
other
Australia
than the
is,
sunshine?
yeah, well, hopefully, although they've had floods recently, haven't they? I think they think I'm bringing the bad weather with me. It's a bit of a long story, so I don't want to bore everyone with it. But I I've had links to Australia for some time. My husband had businesses out there, and so we've been to and fro into Sydney for a number of years. And at one stage pre-COVID, we actually thought we may go and live out there and commute back this way. COVID hit, it never worked. Life took a different kind of pattern and turn, and that was all fine. And then fast forward to last September, when I was at work. I'd been 2 years into my role in Magenta as CEO, was loving it, was really having a great time. And I got a call out of the blue from a headhunter. It was an Australian number. And I was a bit like, well, what's this? And anyway, I took the call, which I wouldn't normally, but I was intrigued. And they said, look, we've got this role in Sydney. It's running the largest housing provider in New South Wales and probably the whole of Australia, and the board are looking for someone from the UK with your kind of background and portfolio, because they feel that they want the experience from someone who's operated in the UK, and because they felt that it was more advanced in terms of a sector. And so I was a bit like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. And sometimes you just think the stars are aligning. It's like, really, are you pulling my chain? Australia, really, Sydney, when we were going to do that. So I just started having conversations because I was intrigued and I'm curious, and I'm naturally curious anyway. And that was kind of end of September time. By January, I'm on a plane over there, having had 5 interviews at stupid o'clock in the morning or the evening, and 7 hours of psychometric testing, which I will never do again as long as I live. I'm on the way to Australia, and yeah, they offered me the job, and it was, Robin, it was the hardest decision that I've ever made in my entire life, for sure it was. But as you can see, we've made that decision, and yeah, in a week's time, I'm off to blow up my life, I guess, and start a new chapter in ours.
Amazing. Well, yeah, love that. I'd love to ask you more questions about that, which I will do at the end if we've got time, but I want to dive into the topic. So just before I do, I have a question for everyone on. So if you can write this in the chat, I want to know what you think, what's the first word that comes to your head, or the first emotion that comes to mind when you hear the word negotiation. So just drop it in the chat, whatever that is to you. We'll give you a few seconds to start the chat. Love that. I'll just tell you, one of the pieces of feedback from the last 2 She Owns It was more funny stories from Robin. So I'll just tell you a quick funny story whilst more people are going to hopefully write to me in the chat. We had a negotiation workshop with a few of us at HSPG, maybe nearly a year ago now. And the end of the workshop, basically we had to do the guy who ran the workshop had another guy on the phone, and it was like a real phone call, it wasn't just a recording. There was another guy on the phone elsewhere who was also a kidnap ransom negotiator. They had both worked in like very high stakes, negotiating people off pirate ships who had been kidnapped and all this like Liam Neeson type stuff. And he basically got us within little teams in HSPG to have a negotiation of someone who was holding his wife ransom in a home with a gun to her head or something, or a knife, whatever. And it was probably the most awkward experience I've had to witness, with all of us trying to negotiate with this guy. Not all of us, it was like three of us that did it. Thankfully not me. I think I would have died further of embarrassment. And yeah, it was definitely, Aga's nodding because she was there as well. It was the most awkward thing watching people have to have these negotiations, because as someone's put, preparation time, oh yeah, as I guess beforehand, but also it's like crunch time, isn't it, when you get to that negotiation sometimes and you just freeze or whatever. So hopefully we will be able to give people some tips that make that less awkward and terrible and embarrassing experience. So yes, I'm going to read some of these words. So power, compromise, conflict, compromise, resolution, preparation time, agreement, and challenge. So that's good because it's kind of a range of emotions from negative to positive. But it's interesting to see what we each associate with negotiation, because sometimes people, absolutely freeze, like I said, and just want to avoid these things like the plague. And some people kind of go into battle. So question for you, Debbie, do you feel confident when negotiating, or do you decide to be confident? So is it almost an automatic feeling of confidence, or do you have to kind of make that decision to be confident and then it follows through?
I guess it depends on what you're negotiating on, doesn't it? And how confident you are in your position. So I think that you can, I think in my experience, I can be both of those things that you've just described, depending on the, so you've just, you've just given that most horrendous kind of, I guess, top level. This is the ultimate negotiation that you're negotiating for someone's life, and
Yeah,
I hope you saved her, by the way. I genuinely hope you saved her. So
definitely not.
that, oh my God. So, would I be confident going into that situation? I have to imagine probably not. But then I think it is you having confidence. One of the comments was preparation, wasn't it? So your preparedness, what you know about your topic subject, what you know about your position, how important the negotiation is to you. Is it something that is really top level of importance to the organisation or to you as an individual, or is it something that actually you've got some real rigor in with and you kind of don't care, so you're happy to walk away? So I suppose it could be either one of those things, and I think throughout my career I've experienced what you described in different times of different examples.
And I think that sometimes I would say women in particular, and this is actually one of the reasons why we started this series, feel extremely uncomfortable to the point where they just won't do it, negotiating their own pay or a pay rise or a promotion. And as I said on the first one of these, that the reason why we sort of brought this concept into light is because we were looking at everyone's annual reviews last year, and there was one guy in particular who doesn't work for HSPG anymore, but he had a pretty average review, and it was very positive at the end in terms of, right, this is all the things that we're going to do to make it better, but it's not been the best year. Let's just wipe the slate clean and move on, and we've got a really good action plan. And then at the end, he asked for a 20% pay rise and a massive bonus, and we were just like, interesting, and not to say that he shouldn't, but we were saying that a woman wouldn't have done that. They just wouldn't have done that. So what would be your advice to, I guess, women and men? What would be your advice in situations of wanting to, let's say, ask for a pay rise, for example? Because I think that that's sometimes a thing that people might know the most about because it's them and their own jobs, but they feel least comfortable in actually bringing it forward to the point, like I say, where they just won't bother.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with all of that. I think we've all experienced it personally, and as leaders as well, you see it, as you just highlighted, Robin. I think you're right. Men are much more comfortable. It sounds like your previous guy, though, had a lack of self-awareness, the one that you've just highlighted. But there we go. Another story, I guess, for another day. In terms of advice, I think again, I think it goes back to that word preparedness, doesn't it? If you feel that you are being undervalued and you feel that people are being paid more than you, it's one of those scenarios where you really want to try and take the emotion out of it. And I think as not just as women, as humans, as individuals, we things like that, we become heightened emotionally because you've got you've got skin in the game yourself, and you do feel very uncomfortable with it. So it's almost the way to take the emotion out of it is to have that preparedness. So to do that work, to understand where you sit on the scale, to be very clear about why you believe that you are underpaid or undervalued. Do your benchmarking exercise. Make sure that you've got that kind of readily available data that backs up what you're trying to say, so that therefore you feel very clear and that you've written it down. And so you're not feeling that you're coming into a situation where you're just going, please may I have some more kind of thing. And it's not that at all. It's like, look, although I feel quite uncomfortable with this, I feel very justified because actually what I've seen is X, Y, Z, and that you have that information at hand that absolutely clearly points out why you strongly believe that. So it's not just an intuitive gut instinct thing, which might be the first point of how you feel, but then back it up with data, back it up with absolute, it needs to be, in this instance, more science than art, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, and I think it takes away that vulnerability because you feel justified. You've got your piece of paper in your hand, you can take it, you feel very justified. So that would
Yeah.
be my advice.
And you've got your facts, like you say. And then something that I often say to my team is make it a no-brainer, whether it's a pay rise for yourself or it's something that you want for the business, make it almost so difficult for the other person to actually even think to disagree with it. It's such a no-brainer. It's such good value for money. It's like, I actually have no other argument other than to say yes.
Exactly, spot on. Yeah, definitely. So you're right. It's the justification. And it's just making it, as you say, it's so difficult to say no because the facts speak for themselves. That's the
Yeah.
point. Is it's not you speaking for yourself. The facts speak for you.
And another conversation I actually had with someone earlier today, he was talking about my area of the business and I want to do this for my area, and I was like, just a piece of advice when you're bringing this forward to the rest of the team, remove the me and the my and the I, because I know that you want it because it's your area of the business. But actually, if you talk about these people that are going to benefit in this area of the business and this area and this team, it's not actually about you, it's about the business. And then he was like, yeah, that's a much better way to frame it, because then one of the things that we have in HSPG as well within our behaviors is attack the problem, not the person. And it's the same with kind of back up the problem, not the person, because you're then talking specifically about the problem or the solution that you're building rather than it's mine and it's for me and it's all about me.
1,000,000%. You're absolutely right. I think we all make that mistake at times, don't we, as we go through our careers as well. And only because we feel very passionate. We feel very, very passionate about, our teams, our people, but I think it's that wider impact of the organisation. So again, take the emotion out of it. Be very clear that this is an organisational push because it will benefit the organisation, which therefore benefits individuals. It's not just one team. Yeah, I think people turn off now as well when it's like my team, it creates silos, which is also just not great in organizational culture.
Yeah, definitely. And was there ever a time where you weren't confident in, I guess, putting your opinion forward in the room and negotiating?
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. So many times. And yeah, and I'm sure there will be again. I think one, and I've talked about this before publicly, is that particularly in housing, I've been the only female in the boardroom on a number of occasions. And, Robin, I'm sure you've been in similar situations. I've been in scenarios where I've faced investors and bankers and who have in the main been male, who have always directed their conversations to the other males in the room. And this is, I'm not talking years ago, I'm talking relatively recently. And so that tends to dent your confidence sometimes as well. It can also have the other effect that you think, come on, you buggers, you are going to listen to me. But then again, you need your style and your delivery needs to be right. So yeah, I think there's always those scenarios where you go into situations and you feel you're not necessarily comfortable. I think the other thing as well is occasionally you as a senior leader and particularly as a CEO of an organization, you have to negotiate at times when your position isn't necessarily strongest. And that's always difficult to show that you are confident, but inwardly you're not at all, because that for whatever reason, whether that's because there's been a service delivery quality issue, so you're on the back foot to start off with, but you've got to negotiate, or there's been an issue that you're aware of that your organization has created or caused, and and therefore sometimes it is very difficult because you're not going into negotiation in a position of strength, but you still have to show confidence, and you have to be clear on your red lines. You have to be clear on what you will and won't compromise on, which I saw also in the chat. And ultimately for me, negotiation, what you really need to be is a win-win. If you can get a win-win, then in the main, then that works. I've had some really interesting negotiations relatively recently with unions, and that's a really interesting negotiation situation, to the point that When I first joined, when I first started the role that I'm currently in at the moment that I'm about to leave, I'd only been in the organisation 4 or 5 weeks when there was a legacy issue that meant that there was industrial action and I had to walk through a picket line. So kind of negotiating through that was really interesting.
Mm. And I suppose I actually remember that. I remember speaking to you at the time. It was all kicking off. Um, yeah, I suppose that's something where, however senior you are, when you're in a new role, you're never going to have the utmost confidence because you new.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's You're always going to have that. I suppose at the back of your mind of, do I have all the facts? Is it right what I'm being told? Is this the
Yeah.
right thing to do?
Mm.
And when I went into that situation with the unions, to me, I wanted to end that industrial action, not at any cost, but I was in quite a conflicted situation because my colleagues who I was just joining the team of, and my exec colleagues, they've been in a long-standing situation with the union, so they were quite entrenched in their views. It was like, no, we shouldn't give in, we shouldn't give in. The unions were like, we're never going to give in. Colleagues were, the whole kind of situation there. So trying to make the right decision there on your own, mainly, as to what you think is the right thing to do, is sometimes tricky.
Mm. And would you ever say that being senior or the most senior, i.e., when you're a CEO, has hindered, or has it always helped?
Um, I think what I've learned over the last sort of 2 and a bit years is that the title, the role, it comes with a lot of responsibility, a huge amount of accountability, but a lot of respect as well. So therefore, whether we like it or not, and I absolutely desperately try not to work in hierarchies, and I know, Robin, that you're exactly the same in that, but it does give you, to some extent, and I want to be really careful with my words here, but, and again, I did see this in the chat, it does give you a sense of power to some extent because you are the top, the end of the line, I guess. But therefore, sometimes I think, and going back to situations, for example, as unions or even large contracts, sometimes it's a clever play that leave you to the end. So
Mm.
sometimes there is that as well. It's tactics with your negotiation about who goes in first, depending on where you see is this going to be we need to resolve this now and that's it and there's no leeway, or is there going to be a dance? If there's going to be a dance, and that, and sometimes again with unions, for example, there can be a dance, and contractors as well, and bids, then it's at what stage do you come into the conversation? So yeah, there's that tactical piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, you need that path of escalation, otherwise you've kind of got no cards to play left.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You run out of room,
And
don't you?
yeah, yeah. And then within obviously this industry of social housing that we're in, and not everyone on the call will be, but I guess it also applies to, healthcare and the other industries that you've been in. There often is a clash, or maybe there's always a clash between sort of customer priorities and governance, and then getting the deal done and the commercial side. So how do you bring in everyone in the team into alignment?
I think that's a really good point, and you've hit the nail on the head. They've not always been really good bedfellows in terms of care, support. When you particularly you deal in occasions with the most vulnerable in society, yeah, actually there's a monetary kind of value that you need to put on some of your negotiation, and some colleagues find that very difficult. I currently work in an organisation that's a not-for-profit organisation. So therefore, there's an expectation at times that means that you're an absolute charity, whereas we push back very strongly on that. We're not for profit, but we're not for dividend, but actually, we need to absolutely have really strong financial health, more so
Mm,
than anyone. So therefore, you've got to get that balance right. So the way, like anything, and it's how you engage. It's the why. You have to bring people on by explaining the why. Why are you doing it? What is the main output of this? Why is it important that financially you have that return? And although that it doesn't mean that that's going into individuals' pockets, what it does mean is you have to have more so that strong, as I say, financial health, and that health check that means that organisation exists long after me or anyone else that works there. So it's just explaining how that works. We did an exercise recently on Jaffa cakes, for example. Whereas, so our CFO to really connect with our 600 colleagues who all have very, very, very varying roles within the organisation and various different views on things as well. So he got the whole organisation in one of our big live events like this to go online, and while we were all sitting there, and order 6 packets of Jaffa cakes. And what he did to highlight that was just the difference that would bring by just asking, one question of order me 6 packets of Jaffa cakes. So some people were, coming back and saying, yeah, I found some, they're £3.22. Someone else was like, oh, mine are £4.86, but I've got to wait a week. Others are like, no, mine will be here tomorrow. And it was a really fun exercise, but it showed you just how different, just asking one thing, and how important that is then to the organisation, because you need them when. So we said we needed the Jaffa cakes tomorrow, but you obviously want to get the best value for money. And so I think that whole value for money piece that people can really relate to. So it's just making things relatable, I guess.
That sounds really good, especially with so many of you. I bet there were a load of different things.
Like,
that's great.
Yeah, I got misshaped ones. There'd be the ones who were more creative as well, which was
that's interesting. I thought when you started that, I thought you were going to say that people sort of misconstrued the brief in terms of the communication, because I've seen someone do not that, but a similar thing, in that the person says, I want everyone to draw a circle and a square. And everyone does something completely different, because some people heard a circle in a square, some people heard a circle and a square, some people did them massive and the whole piece of paper, some people did them tiny. And it's just probably out of 600 people, every single person will draw that in a totally different way. And then you realize, oh, actually, we need more communication here if we all want to get on the same page.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. I've done exercises like that as well, and it's just we used to do one where we used to sit down with everyone and say, right, in your head, think of a cat sitting on a mat. And so it's like, yeah, okay. So have you got that in your head? You've got a cat sitting on a mat. If we did it now as well, it's everyone got a cat sitting on a mat. And then when you go round and you ask individuals what their cat on that mat looks like, they're all different completely.
Yeah.
You get some people who've got big fat ginger tabby cats with fireplaces and rugs, and other people it's just a basic line drawing that looks like a cartoon. But what it shows you is that just one simple thing like a cat sitting on a mat just shows how different people's mindsets are when they think of something. And I think that's just so powerful in that sense, that when you're trying to communicate something to a group of colleagues, even if they are in the same teams or have the same sort of roles, let alone a very disparate, diverse organisation, that you can, the ability for people to just think differently in a neurodivergent way is it's crazy. But life, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing, that when you think of negotiation, I think that other than the pay rise thing, which I think people would think internally, I think a lot of people see it as an external thing, whether you're fundraising or whether you're, dealing with, let's say, local authorities or housing providers, etc. But I would actually say that negotiation happens every day, all day, within your role, with the person sat next to you, with your line manager, with your team. And I think that especially when you have such differently motivated teams within a business, but you all have to work together and be on the same page, is where the negotiation element actually really kicks in even more, to get everyone, working really strongly together.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. When I knew that I was doing this, and I was thinking about it early this morning and stuff, and I was thinking about different levels of negotiation. And you're right, you go pay rise, I just gave examples of unions, of bids, of contracts, but every single day you're negotiating with your team, with your customers, and I would also argue, in your personal lives. I mean, Robin, I know your personal circumstances, you know, I follow you on Instagram. I would imagine that you are negotiating heavily on a daily basis with a 3-year-old and a nearly, you know, 1-year-old. So I would imagine you have more negotiation skills than most, and other mums will have that, and dads as well, because, you know, we are constantly negotiating, aren't we? We're negotiating our way around life a lot as well, and particularly at the moment, because things are, you know, quite challenging both economically and, you know, so I think we're constantly negotiating ourselves. You know, we negotiate our kind of our gas bills, our electric bills. You know, we're negotiating kind of what's important to us as families. So yeah, it's, I think we probably do it a lot more than we give ourselves credit for, and so therefore shouldn't be as nervous when we go into battle as we would see it in a work set, because we are doing it every day.
Yeah, and that's another thing as well, that when you almost like reflect on your day and realize, you know, I've negotiated, let's say, 50 things already by this point today, I can do a 51st thing. And yeah, that is actually a really great piece of advice, especially for people who may be a bit nervous going into a real negotiation. Actually reflect on what you've already done in your day before 9 a.m. and you've probably done a lot. And another tip I'll pass on, and I'll let you know in the next one whether this works, that Paul, who obviously, Debbie, you know, is our business consultant, and he told me once, you know, always put like a random number on the end of a negotiation. So, you know, if you're negotiating a salary, you know, put like a 7 on the end or a 3. You know, don't just make it around 5 or a 0, because that's just what people do, and you don't need to do that. And if you ask for another 1 or 2, then you would probably get it, because it's random. So yesterday I actually put an offer on a house, and I said to my husband, I was like, let's just put a 2 on the end. And and he was like, why? You know, just surely it should be the round number. And I was like, no, it shouldn't. It actually should be random. So we'll see if we get it. Using that
Fingers
tip.
crossed. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Okay, so on negotiations as well, and again, cover all areas of the spectrum in terms of internal, external teams and whatever. Is there a particular mistake, or maybe a couple of mistakes, that you see people making, and how would you reframe the mistake?
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that people make is probably delivery, is going in to negotiate and seeing that as as you know, your point about kind of a hostile negotiation, you know, that there's some sort of hostage situation going on or something, and that we treat every negotiation like that. So, you know, you walk in kind of almost ready for battle. And I think that again, sometimes when we're displaying heightened behaviours of either nervousness or stress, then that can be an outpouring that maybe we don't go in there very soft, and we don't go in there listening and just trying to have an amicable relationship, an amicable adult relationship. It, you know, sometimes we've used the words, we go into battle. Now sometimes you have to, and you know, but in the main you shouldn't, you know. The times we just talked about, so internal, you know, external, day to day, family, everything else, 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, I would suggest that they are not a hostile negotiation. It's a negotiation, you know, and it needs to be a win-win for
Yeah.
you know, whoever, you know, both parties. And as long as people feel that, then, you know, again, usually it works. So I think, yeah, that would be one of the things that I think people would make mistakes over sometimes, is going in already in a hostile position and creating conflict, because as soon as you've started to create conflict, it's very, very difficult then, and people become entrenched, and people take things personally, and it's not a personal thing, particularly in business. It's, you know, in the main, it's not. It's a transactional discussion about something that you need to achieve. So if you can, you know, we said it earlier, take the emotion out of it. If you can go in there, you know, trying to be very open, so open body language, and listen, and don't fill the silences. I think we all do that as well. You know, sometimes people need to reflect, they need to think, and silence can be very powerful, particularly in a negotiation or a discussion. it's just one of those things that people are just taking stock to think and to process, but we have to fill that gap. So those are my things. Don't be stroppy, make sure you listen, and enjoy the power of silence.
That the silence one is such a good point. I always sort of clock that when speaking to other people, and I think that people can't not fill the silence sometimes. And particularly when they feel maybe like they're on the back foot, or in a position of less power or whatever. But yeah, it's so interesting. And then I feel like every word that they say that it should be silence is just digging themselves deeper and weakening their position even more, and justifying when actually you may have just been like, yeah, that sounds great. They've just not let you say it.
That's exactly it. And your own teams as well, you'll get to know the people who will fill the silence. So sometimes it's about having that conversation with them beforehand as well, which is the preparedness thing, and saying, like, don't feel you've got to fill the silence, because you actually don't.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like it makes me think, and I'm not a tennis player, so this analogy is as far as my tennis playing goes. But like if you're playing tennis, or if one is playing tennis that isn't me, and you don't let the ball just go out, and you try and get it, and then you hit it, and then you make it go out, and then you lose the point. So it's like, just let it go and let it be, and then actually you didn't even need to do anything, and you won the point.
That is absolutely genius, but it's a great analogy and absolutely right. Spot on.
Yeah. Okay, so my next question is, and there might not be one here, so if there's not, then that's fine. But what is a line or even a tip that you might rely on when things do get a bit tense or frictious?
That's a really good question. I don't think I have a line, but I guess if things do get fractious, then I probably would try and not belittle things, but just try and make things a little bit more light-hearted. And if things are really, really bad, again, I've worked in the NHS, so when people are when there's real conflict, or if you're having conflict around even complaints and those things, then there are times, aren't there, that it is to just take a breath and to stop and to walk away, and be prepared to do that. So I've done that in negotiation before, where we've been prepared to sort of say, look, let's just leave this, let's just all sleep on it, and let's come back around the table, because if you're just going round and round and round and round and round. So I think there's that. I wouldn't say it's something that I use all the time, and I'm sure I'm teaching people to suck eggs here, but I guess that would be the only thing, is you read the room. So if you do feel you can diffuse it, and without that becoming patronizing, that you can diffuse it because you have that relationship with people, then yes, you can do something that kind of is a bit more lighthearted, or tries to bring a bit of humor in, that kind of diffuses it. But if you don't have that solid relationship, and you feel that things are particularly tense, then I think the best thing to do is kind of go, look, shall we just leave it there, and whether you sleep on it, or you go out and have a coffee or a walk round, or you all come back again, I think sometimes you can do that if it's different. And that's in any negotiation, isn't it? That's in one-to-ones even, or, as I say, complaint, or any of those situations. I think sometimes we're frightened to do that. I think sometimes it's a bit like filling the silence. We feel we've got to keep going and going and going, and you don't. Just take a minute, take a breath.
Yeah, definitely. And another one on those lines as well, which was a tip from this hostage negotiator, Scott, is he said, think of what you think might trigger you to get a bit tense beforehand, and how you're going to make sure that doesn't happen. So almost prepare, but not only your facts and your data, but yourself and your emotional regulation, and be able to, when it does happen in the meeting, just you're thinking, I knew this was going to happen, I've already prepared myself, it's rolling off, and I'm good. So that would hopefully make it less likely that everything's going to get all tense, because you've already decided that this isn't going to bother you.
I think that's absolutely right. It is that. I suppose it's almost a bit like manifestation, isn't it? It's like manifesting it a bit as well, and seeing the other side of that is seeing what success looks like to you. So seeing yourself and your team or whoever walking out of that room saying, yeah, that's what success looks like, and therefore what do I need to do to get there with that, and what, as you say, will could be the red lines or could be the triggers that could prevent us from getting there. So that's all the preparedness of not just your data and your information, as you say, but that just whole manifesting what success looks like.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I've got a few more questions, and then I'm going to throw out a question to you guys in the audience. And then also, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. So my final-ish question is, how do you handle it when someone questions your tone? Or maybe that's never happened, but if they have sort of, going back to the assertive/aggressive comment, has anyone ever questioned your tone in terms of being assertive, let's say?
If they have, it's a long time ago, a long time ago, because I think that one of the things I've learned in my career is just how to regulate myself, I think. And the reason I say that, that sounds like I'm being quite cocky about that. I'm not. I'm just very self-aware, and I know that one of my strengths is I'm very, I'm high energy and I'm very passionate about what I do. Therefore, the downside of that is my strength can tip into one of my weaknesses. So therefore, my passion sometimes, I think, can be seen that, am I too, what would be the word, does my energy become not negative, but does it look like I'm being too pushy, or that my heightened state could be that sometimes I'd have the ability to swear, for example, because I get like really excitable, I guess, about something that I feel very strongly about. And I've always been someone who will fight the cause for any cause. I'll fight it, so that if I see an injustice, I'll be the one that would be like saber rattling. So I've had to learn that throughout my career as well, and tone myself down a little bit. So I think that if I'm particularly going into a negotiation or something that I think is going to be particularly tricky or difficult, and at whatever level, including family and stuff, then I'll tone myself down. I'll tone my even I'll soften my voice, I'll slow down as I speak, because you're all hearing me now, I can speak at 100 miles an hour. So therefore I'll tone down, I'll try and be very calm and sort of pragmatic in my approach. So I don't think I have been questioned, but I think that, Robin, is because I've blooming well worked hard at it, because I've felt that I've had to. Speak to me in a few weeks when I get to Australia, maybe they'll tell me.
No, I do agree with that, and I feel like I do relate in terms of I definitely started my career complete bull in a china shop, like passion to the nth degree, and realized it was like, whoa, this is not well received, like calm down. But I also do think that is a female thing. Do you as well?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's not solely female, is it? I've got a colleague at the moment, a male colleague who's an extra. So I think it's also extrovert and introvert thing.
Yeah,
So I think for females, I think we do get overexcited a lot, and we got have got high energy and stuff, and in the main, and we have lots of hormones as well, don't we? Which kind of don't help. We probably that is one of those things that unfortunately doesn't help. But I don't think it's solely a female thing. I think that there is an extrovert introvert thing. So I've got a team at the moment which is probably 50-50. So 50-50 of extrovert, 50% introvert. And it's very interesting, that whole dynamic. We recently did a podcast with the team, and just on that whole thing of how it works. And one of my colleagues said something that was really interesting. He said that he feels that some people, so extroverts and high energy people like us, we start the day on full battery, and then that battery kind of like winds down as the day goes. That's how we do. Whereas introverts, sometimes they'll start on a low battery, but they'll feed off extroverts, and they'll build their battery, so their days build up. Whereas so I think it is just that whole kind
like
of
they warm up.
Yeah,
and we run out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I think maybe that's it as well. It's to,
Mm,
yeah, there's all those different nuances of, yeah, female, male, extrovert, introvert, all of
yeah.
those bits.
Definitely. Yeah. And I actually heard a podcast once. I'm going to be really unhelpful here because I completely can't remember what it's called, but it was it was another level of sort of labeling people, if you like, not introvert, extrovert. It was talking about some kind of type. And one of the types was like a conductor. So as in like an energy conductor. So and it's funny because when I was listening to it, I was like, that is my mum. And so basically, if they're with like the high energy people, they can be high energy. But if they're with the low energy people, they literally can't be high energy. So they can't bring the energy. They just like absorb and reflect back whatever's around. And it was saying that sometimes you look down on those people as if, do you not have your own identity? Like, what's wrong with you? But actually, that is a type of person that, yeah, they are a conductor and they absorb and they radiate back. So I do think as well, like when you learn this kind of stuff about other people, you have a new level of appreciation of why people are the way that they are. And that also then helps with negotiation because if you can, I also think sometimes when you're in a room of a negotiation and you actually say nothing, then you can gain the most because you're an observer and you can literally be watching and you can see everything that's going on and you're not focused on like what am I going to say next and how am I going to respond to that and they've just said this and that pissed me off and whatever. It's just I am literally watching the room here and I can see everything that's going on, and that's a really powerful place to be in sometimes, the people who just like absorb it all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. The reflectors and the observers and the watchers are, yeah, 100%.
Mm, mm. So, okay, I'm going to ask you my final question, which is what would 25-year-old Debbie be surprised to know about how you negotiate and operate yourself now?
Oh wow. I think it is the thing that we just talked about, really. I
Yeah.
think, your point of bull in a china shop. I'm a Taurus as well, so I'm clearly a bull through and through. Um, and yeah, I think that, I was incredibly high energy back then. I still am now, but I think that I've channeled it. And I think that the 25-year-old Debbie would be blown away, I think, to think of what I've actually achieved. Um, that I think, yeah, 25-year-old Debbie would never believe it. I mean, I think 25-year-old Debbie always had spark and drive and ambition for sure. But I think that the inner saboteur and the imposter syndrome of her would never have thought that I would have got to this because of all of those foibles that I thought that I had. That I was too outspoken, the way I look, the way I dress, the being outspoken, and all of those things, and that just thought, yeah, you'd never get to those dizzy heights, and without selling your soul to the devil, which is the way I would have seen it back then. That the only
Yeah.
way that I would have got to where I am now is that I would have had to have become this corporate kind of autonom style animal, because that's the way that you see it back then, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and obviously that's not been the case. Far from it.
Mm,
I still, although I've channeled myself and I'm calmer and more reflective and all of those things, I still bring my true self to work, and I
mm,
always have done. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that 25-year-old Debbie would be very proud of you.
Thank you. I think she's probably thinking, what the hell are you doing going to blooming Australia, and you must be mad. Yeah.
Oh no, definitely not. It sounds absolutely amazing. Um, I'm very excited to hear how it goes. So, everyone else, I just want you to take 30 seconds and think about one thing you haven't asked for recently, but you have wanted to. So you don't have to share it, but obviously you can. So either at home or at work or in life or just anything. And then I want you to so have a think on that and then ask yourself why not? Like what is the barrier to that? It might be because you didn't have all the information, or it might be because you didn't feel like it was justified, or because you weren't able to be prepared, or whatever it might be. And my challenge to you would be do that within the next 7 days. If it really is something that you have wanted to ask for or wanted to negotiate, do it. and hopefully we have given you some good tips to empower you to do so. Any other thoughts on that, Debbie, in terms of giving everyone the boost to just go for it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think times like this when you can reflect on stuff as well. So it is the negotiation and it is asking for something, but it's allowing yourself time to think about those things, because you've just posed that question, which I bet most of the time we, as incredibly busy individuals in today's world, just don't have the time to do. And they might come to us at 3 a.m, or when we're in the shower or whatever, and then they're fleeting things. They go again because we get back on the treadmill of life, and in the main worry about other people. Excuse me. So yeah, this is really not a good way to end, is it?
Okay.
Oh, crikey.
Take your time.
Thank you. I don't know, swallowed some dust or something. So yeah, I think it's take the time, allow yourself to think about it. Think about it, and don't be embarrassed either, or don't kind of push it, aside and think, oh, I haven't got time for that. What is it? Because I'm a great believer, and I've said this before, sometimes you need to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yes.
That's a really, it's a really, really good adage that you to think about when you're a leader, when you're a mother, a wife, a friend, a partner, whatever you are. Sometimes, as much as it goes against our views that that's not right because it's a selfish act, it's not. Put your own oxygen mask on first. Be the best person that you can be, and that is how that you will therefore just thrive and help others. In my view, so go for it.
Completely agree with that, and that is such a good point. Take the time, and then don't let yourself just be like, oh no, I'll deal with that later, because later won't come, and you'll be 1 year down the line and be like, oh yeah, I thought about that when they did that podcast and then I forgot about it. So yeah, really thank you so much for all the tools, all the tips, all the honesty, and for giving us your time when you are literally moving halfway across the world in a week. So yeah, I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have all enjoyed it, and definitely everyone go negotiate, go use your voice and own it. She owns it.
Perfect. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone. Have a lovely day and a lovely weekend, and we shall see you soon.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.